Let me know when you're.
Go ahead.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to another episode of D&D Dynamite 80s. I'm DH.
I'm DC.
And as always, we're here to take another fun-filled look back into the 80s. DC, how was your week, brother?
Man, it's been busy, hasn't it? We're trying to wrap this thing up this school year.
I'm telling you, not only that, but we got season 2 wrapping up. Got a
Yes.
couple of interviews going on this week, and
Yes.
I think one more podcast, and then we're going to take a well-deserved 2 days off.
You got that right. You got that right. Hey, I'm excited about our guest that's joined us tonight,
brother,
man.
I can't wait, brother. I was just about to say, I can't wait for this one. So without any further ado, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Yeah, we're honored to have Paul Robb with Information Society joining us tonight. And Paul, how are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm sitting up here in chilly New Hampshire.
Wow. Okay.
Everything's great.
We're burning up down in Tennessee. It's about 90 here in the Nashville area right now.
We hit the 90s today.
So it's been summer's trying to come on a little too quick.
Yeah.
Guys, as some of you may know and some may not, Paul is a synthesizer player, producer, songwriter. He's done it all for a good while, man. And interesting, as I did a little background, 2 Silo Awards for creative excellence in advertising and design. Can you touch on that just for a minute? Kind of what is that about?
Yeah, I think you're talking about Clio Awards.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Clio Awards are they're an advertising business award where everyone gets together and mutually admires everyone else in the business. But I won those Clios years ago when I was looking to branch out from making records. And I was living in Minneapolis at the time, and a friend of mine who ran a music company for advertising called me up and said, how'd you like to do some commercials? And I said, I guess so. I was in the middle of moving from Minneapolis to LA, and I was scoring a film, but the money sounded good. And and I said, why would you call me for something like this? And he said, well, the client, which in this case was BMW cars.
Wow.
They want to use techno music, and you're the only person I know. They called me, the agency called me, and then I called you because you're the only person I know who does techno. I didn't really do techno at that. I mean, we weren't really techno, but to the average agency person, it's all the same. So I ended up doing, I didn't realize at the time, but it was kind of a Herculean effort. I did the entire campaign all by myself. And out of those 5 spots, actually 3 of them won Clios for music, for original music. And the funny thing is, as soon as I finished them, I moved, and I was like, well, that was fun. I did this little TV commercial thing, but really I'm on to bigger and better things. And I was in LA and doing all my projects and stuff. And there was about a 12-month period where nobody could get a hold of me. And the commercials were so incredibly successful and popular that all these agencies were going crazy trying to find out the guy who did the music for the BMW spots, and no one knew how to get hold of it. So, I mean, it was fun. I probably missed out on $100,000, but
Wow.
But it was great. And it, it turned out that years later, I kind of went back to that business, and for the last 15 years of my life, that's kind of been my day job, has been doing music for TV and primarily commercials.
Okay.
And not all techno.
Right.
Paul, what I'd like to kind of touch on, Information Society started, the band started, I think it was 1982, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
First off, the longevity of the band is amazing, but can you kind of give us the background of how the band came together and everything started flowing?
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, so the idea kind of was hatched in high school. I put together a bunch of little bands for high school talent shows. And I was more into sort of jazz and funk music. And, so we had bands that did covers of Prince and the B-52s and Gary Newman and bands like that were all very influential on us. And then, so, the bug kind of hit me. And after I graduated from high school and I was in college, I was like, now that I'm old enough to get into bars,
Yeah.
drinking age was 18 in those days.
Yeah.
I gotta do a band. I was so excited by all the new music that was coming out, especially, synth pop music from Europe and all those bands that we all know and love. The only thing was I didn't really know anybody else who wanted to do anything like that, other than a bunch of guys from high school who were like into metal and, stuff like that. So I called up the only guy who I knew who could sing, and his name was Kurt Larson. And we had been working together in a couple of different instances doing market research, where we would call people up and ask them about their SodaStream machine or something.
Yeah.
And, oh my God, it was horrible. And so we had the two of us, and I started writing songs. And then I was like, we need the technology in those days, because the premise behind the band, those were going to be completely electronic, like our idols, the Normal and Fad Gadget and these kind of real hardcore, like all electronic bands. We needed somebody else to help run the machine. So our social network was so small. I said, well, I'll just get my girlfriend to do it. So we ended up as a three-piece for our first few shows. Then Kurt added his girlfriend into the band, and then we were four. And then about 6 months after that, we had this guy from high school who I only knew from playing banjo and playing in a Kiss cover band. And he was just always hanging around our shows. And then at one point he volunteered to run our lights. And we were like, okay, that's cool. And then we brought him up on stage one night to play a banjo solo, which was ridiculous. And then we put him in the band because he was so awesome. And that was James Cassidy. So that's how we started. Yeah.
Wow.
That is cool. That is probably the coolest story of how a band came together that I've ever heard.
Well, it gets
hey,
even more,
how can you beat banjos and girlfriends?
Yeah.
So yeah,
it gets even more perverse because what happened was we did the band for about a year and nothing happened, and we didn't really know what to do. We spent money to do a self-funded little EP record, which was god awful. And we just kept waiting to be discovered and to be signed by, and no one was listening, and thank God, because we were awful. And so Kurt quit the band and went off to Vienna to have a semester in school in Vienna. Jim quit the band and ran away to Seattle to have a completely different life. And only then did we finally write a song that people really wanted to hear, and that was Running. And Running became, and this was in, I guess, the fall of '85, was such a huge hit in New York. I started calling them and say, hey, you fuckers, it's like, we got a big hit, maybe you want to come back now. like rats coming back to the show.
Yeah.
Not singing anymore. They all kind of trickled back. And that's when we formed the band as it is today.
That is amazing. And that kind of lays the basis. My next question was, what do you think the root was for the longevity of the band?
Yeah.
But I think you just explained it. I mean, the friendships and all, but
yep.
Is there anything you can add to that as far as, because you see a lot of bands, they go through a lot of changes as time goes by. Yeah. But what would you contribute the longevity of to the band?
I mean, I won't say that we haven't gone through changes. I mean, at one point, we decided to all quit in '93, and Kurt said, well, I want to keep going. So he put out a record basically it was a solo record, but it was called Information Society. And then the next record after that was like 10 years later, and I wanted to put a new record out, and he didn't want to be involved. So I put a record out without him. But I think, with a lot of bands, what happens is they have their baby band state where they're a local band somewhere, and they got a following, and then they get signed, and then that period of being a national band lasts for a period of time, and then it ends. And most of the time, these bands, when it ends, they've got to go back into the real world and get a job and learn a skill, and maybe they go back to school, or they become lawyers, or high school teachers.
Yeah.
Maybe. And we did that to a certain extent, but we never really stopped making new music. We always had the compulsion, and for the last let's say 20 years of the band, it's not like we've been playing stadiums and having huge record deals and things like that. We've been on different labels, we've had self-released records, and but we have a really faithful core of fans and followers who follow everything we do, and we love it. They love what we do, and so that gives us enthusiasm to keep going.
CDC, there's hope for us yet. Our fans keep following us. Lord,
Yeah, maybe we will add our two. Yeah, absolutely. Question: I read an article on synthesizers that was pretty interesting, like the history of them and stuff like that. And here's a quote from the author that I want to run by you and see what you think. If you can play a synthesizer, you can play not just any instrument in the orchestra, but any instrument you could possibly imagine. That was his take.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was one of the big, attractions for us in the first place. We started. There was two aspects, I think. Number one is we wanted to do music, but we wanted to do music that didn't sound like other people's music. We weren't going to strap on guitars, and we were in the midst of a big scene in Minneapolis of grunge, and garage rock, and the Replacements and Husker Du and all that stuff. And it was kind of like back to roots, and wear your flannel shirts and drink your beers on stage, and dress down and act down. You know what I mean? And we were never like that. We wanted to make music that was unique and strange, and we wanted to be people who were unique and strange. And so we kind of came more out of that glam rock tradition, if you will, which goes, obviously much farther back than that, but we didn't want to be average and the norm, even if we could do the norm in a good way, which I don't know if we could or not, but we needed to distinguish ourselves, and synthesizers were the way to do that. And when we first started, the technology was pretty damn new. The idea of a fully electronic band, it wasn't our idea, and we certainly weren't the first to do it, but it was hard going at the beginning. Also, because we liked up-tempo electronic music, people thought it was disco, because when we started in 82, 83, as a matter of fact, we would have sometimes hecklers at our concerts that would shout out, like, "You're 10 years too late, disco's dead," and things like that. And I mean, wow, you couldn't really be more wrong than that, As a matter of fact, it was kind of techno and house music that overtook what we were doing with synth pop, and kind of between the pincers of techno and grunge was kind of what squeezed us out of what they used to call alternative music.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big things on the 80s is there was such a variety of music, and it's like everybody kind of listened to everything. I don't know if that's still the case today, but I mean, like I like the more heavy metal, hair metal, but I would listen to anything. I love, any type of music from the 80s. I still listen to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I totally agree with you, and I think that it's hard to even convince people, younger people of today, how free and eclectic the scene in the 80s really was. We came up in let's say we were products of the late 70s, where there was a huge backlash against corporate rock. And so basically anything you could do that was weird was cool. And so we listened to bands, you know, from Kraftwerk, which is as cold and European and German and electronic as you get, to bands like The Residents or B-52s that, you know, were kind of almost like a throwback to the 50s, but it was still cool because it was not Journey, you know.
Right.
And that lasted even when after we moved to New York in '86, we would go to clubs, and in those days, you know, like alternative music and hip hop were the same thing. There wasn't really a hip hop industry yet, and so you would go to clubs and they would play Eric B and Rakim, and then the next song they'd play was Big Audio Dynamite, and then they'd play, you know, whatever, you know, some other European new wave group, and DNA and sort of that new wave, no wave kind of New York thing. And it was all mixed up in the same clubs and in the same crowds, and everybody loved everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's a classic story of, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of rock scenes that were eclectic in the same way from earlier periods, or R&B and soul. And as soon as the industry gets their claws into a scene, they co-opt it, and they sort of try to put it into a silo. And, you know, that's what you are now, you know.
Right.
And
right.
It works. It worked for us, you know, but it works until it stops working, you know.
Right.
That's why I think bands like Depeche Mode were so brilliant, because, you know, if you want to talk about longevity, them and Erasure and OMD, those bands that really never stopped, and they were able, especially Depeche Mode, they've been able to kind of surf styles. You know, they were a silly little synth pop band in 1982, and then by 1987 they were wearing leather and like posing with guitars. You know, they didn't play guitars, you know, and wearing cowboy hats. You know, because they knew how to surf those things, and we didn't really want to surf that. We wanted to kind of try to define what those waves were going to be, and that was a tougher road.
Gotcha.
I think kind of to that point, right here around in the Nashville area, I remember back in the 80s when rap was really starting to gain some traction. It didn't matter who was coming to town, they were opening. It didn't matter if it was Van Halen, special guest star Rat, or if it was Johnny Cash, Rat was opening the concert. And it was just so cool because you get that variety.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, believe me, we've played concerts with a shockingly diverse array of people. We once played a show in Puerto Rico where we opened for REO Speedwagon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they were very nice people.
Unreal. Well, and that kind of leads me into my question. DH, I don't know if you've seen a couple of these videos on YouTube or not. One of my favorites of these guys is, I think it's in Rio, and it's Think.
Yes.
And somebody filmed it live, and it's unbelievable. The energy that is amazing that they put out. And
you might be thinking of Rock in Rio, which was the biggest shows we ever did. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And the lead singer, DH, I've never seen that. The guys on skates.
Yeah.
But I was just, I have watched that video over and over and over and over because it's just electrifying. It is.
And that's back to the point of, like, I started watching the videos, and even as an old metalhead or whatever, I'm like, man, I'm really into it. I like this. You know, I'm really enjoying it.
And just the energy that you guys put out. Was that part of the image that y'all wanted to try to reach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, like I said, we grew up on these new wave bands that were very, you know, for lack of a better word, like very, very cool. So if you think about Gary Newman, or if you think about DAF, or all these German bands and English bands, synth bands I'm talking about, their whole thing was like, we don't do anything, we don't move, we're very down, we just, you know, and that was a choice that they made, which was in reaction to, Mark Bolan and like I say, Def Leppard or whatever. But we had they were influences on us, but we were also influenced by New York electro music and hip hop music and very sort of theatrical, goofy music like The Residents or other band Devo, and so we wanted to kind of take synth music out of just being a cerebral thing where you stand behind your keyboards in a leather trench coat and scowl at the audience. And I think it was appropriate for our music too, because we used beats that were hadn't been used in synth pop prior to that point.
Well, I think as a person that just, for the entertainment value, I get more into that when I see the energy and the passion of the band on stage. Then, like you said, there's some bands that, and I get it, that's their clique, is they're going to stand there. But it's hard for me to get into their music. But when I see a band that's really into it, the way you guys are, and the way you perform, it's like I can get into this.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I'm in terms of the three members of the band, I am the most deadpan one, just because I'm not a great performer. But as an old metalhead, you should probably keep your eye on Jim Cassidy, our bass player, because he learned every move he does is a direct lift from Gene Simmons. His entire junior high and high school years were trying to live out his fantasy to be the next Gene Simmons. And when you watch him play bass on stage, every move is a Gene Simmons move.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Paul, we want to thank you for taking time with us. Man, this is awesome. We hope to catch up with you again in the future. But best of luck for everything that's going on. Will you update our listeners where they can keep in touch with you guys and see what's going on?
Well, we have a very active Facebook page and a fan community there. We have a pretty decent Bandcamp page, which has a lot of our releases. And serendipitously, just because this is how it works in the music business, Tommy Boy and their new sort of corporate overlords are starting to re-release our entire catalog on vinyl and double vinyl. There's going to be this is top secret, so don't tell anybody, but there's going to be a re-release of our first record on vinyl this summer, coming very soon. In the fall, they're going to re-release a 30th anniversary Peace and Love Incorporated double vinyl release. And then next year, there's going to be more to come. So strangely enough, coming back from the dead, there's a lot of activity going on right now.
Yeah. Fantastic.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
Well, Paul, we really appreciate you joining us. And folks, check out Information Society. Go on there, watch the videos. Hey, follow them. Amazing band. Can't say enough about it. Just amazing performers, amazing musicians.
Absolutely.
DC, I think that's going to do it for another one, brother.
Hey, fantastic job, man.
Yep, great show tonight, and appreciate all the effort you put forth, and appreciate Paul joining us there. And folks, till next time, I'm DH saying, be kind.
And DC, keep playing the 80s.
There you go.
Thanks, guys.